What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Harry back with another one of the best videos on the internet. This is the 7th episode of my original tower defense simulator series, The Rundown. Just to remind you, in these videos, I go over everything you need to know about each tower, including its stats, providing general strategy advice, doing a skin showcase, sharing trivia information, and finally giving my overall opinion on each tower. All of this information comes from the official Tower Defense Simulator wiki, which I will link in the description below. In this episode, I'll be covering everything you need to know about a tower that was originally based on a YouTuber, the Militant. Now, the Militant has a unique history in tower defense sim, but I'm not going to be covering that in depth here. I'll have to make another video going over its transformation from the John Tower to the Militant. Now, moving on, the Militant is a tower you can buy for 2,000 coins from the in-game store. Originally, you could have obtained it from a code, which is now expired. The Militant deals low damage, but with a very fast fire rate. It's also cheap to place and upgrade, making it a very useful early game tower. The feature that really sets this tower apart from most others is the fact that it has a specific number of times it can shoot before it has to pause and reload. When it runs out of ammo or all the enemies leave its range for about a second, it will reload, gaining back all of its lost ammo. The Militant is considered an early to mid-game tower in part because of its DPS and low range. Now let's go ahead and go over this tower's stats. The Militant costs $750 to place and sells for $250 at base level. It's an offensive type tower that's placed on the ground and has no placement limit. The level 1 upgrade costs $200 and adds 2 range. The level 2 upgrade costs $450, adds 1 range, and gives the tower hidden detection. The level 3 upgrade costs $1,800, adds 1 damage, increases the fire rate from 0.2 to 0.125, and adds 12 more rounds to the Militant's magazine. And finally, the level 4 upgrade costs $4,500 and adds 2 damage and 1 range. Now let's take a look at this tower's stats table and compare it to a few others. Here you can see the max level damage per second for the Militant is 19.2 and the max range is 15. Now that DPS is okay, but not great, and that range is just downright trash. To see what I'm talking about, let's compare it to the regular soldier and the hunter. As you can see from the soldier's stats, the soldier and the Militant are basically the same tower as far as the numbers go. The biggest difference between these two towers are their stats at the lower levels. Notice that the Militant's reload time stays fixed at 2.5 throughout every level, while the soldier's burst count goes up and its cooldown goes down. This is one part of why the soldier's DPS goes up at the higher levels. The other part comes from its damage also increasing. The soldier tops out at 5 damage per shot, while the Militant only gets up to 4. But the reason why the Militant's DPS is higher than the soldier's at max level is because of their different fire rates. While both towers start with exactly the same fire rate, the Militant does get a little better boost at the higher levels, which gives it that higher DPS. Now I want to say something about the Militant's reloading animation here. In my last video, which was the Militant versus all modes, I went off on a rant about how the tower's DPS is not actually 19.2, but is actually much lower because the number doesn't take into account the reload time. Well, wouldn't you know it, when I went to the TDS wiki today to get all of my facts straight for this video, I found this little note all the way at the bottom of the page that says DPS is calculated as damage times ammo divided by reload time plus fire rate times ammo. So it turns out that Wikicolors or whoever set this up did their homework, and this DPS does in fact take into account the reload time. So I stand corrected. This is the actual DPS of the tower. The thing is, now I know that DPS would be even higher without the tower having to reload, which brings me to my next point. Since both towers cost just about the same amount of money to take to max level, I'm pretty confident that the soldier will perform pretty much exactly the same as the Militant in any given situation. Alright, moving on, now let's compare the Militant to the Hunter tower. I chose this tower because it costs almost the exact same amount of money to max as the Militant, and even though it does more damage per shot, the Hunter's DPS is actually just slightly lower than the Militant's. Obviously, the big difference between these two towers is the range. The Hunter has a massive advantage because it can attack for much longer with this range increase. And a bonus of having a large range stat means that the DJ will boost it way higher, since its additional range boost percentage is based off the tower's usual range. So even though the Hunter fires about half as fast as the Militant, it's actually able to do more total damage to an enemy because it can attack for much longer. Putting all this together means that the Hunter is cheaper to max attacks than the Militant, but will perform better because of its massive range stat. Just look at those numbers. I mean, the Hunter's starting range is the same as the Militant's max range. Alright, now moving on to some general strategy advice for the Militant. This tower is great for early game because of its low cost and high DPS. Multiple level 3 Militants can clear out early game enemies pretty easily, and a few level 2 Militants in front of your base at the end of the path are useful for killing leaked enemies, such as hiddens and shadows. In fact, the Militant is very effective against hidden enemies like the hidden boss due to its cheap hidden detection and decent DPS. Because of the Militant's low damage, enemies with a defense stat that appear early on will not really affect its damage that much. However, in mid to late game, the tower will have a harder time killing bigger enemies like the giant boss and the Templar. And finally, the Militant's fire rate can be increased by the commander, and the commander can also decrease its reload time. Now for the question that you've all been waiting for: should the Militant be used to trigger Hidden Wave? No, just no. It costs too much to be placed right away, and while it does decent damage during early game, so does the Golden Scout and the Gladiator, which is what people are using now. And considering its mediocre range, I don't see any use for it during late game or during the Hidden Wave itself. Now, if you have the Militant and you're wondering what a good loadout is for it, I'd recommend something like Militant for early game because it's cheap, has hidden detection, and does good damage. Electroshocker to provide support by slowing enemies down, therefore keeping them in the Militant's attacking range for even longer. Farm to get me some monies. Commander to increase its DPS and bring down its reload time. And the Ranger to really lay into some of the larger health enemies that the Militant struggles with, like the Molten Boss and the Tank. Now I'm going to do a skin showcase for all the skins available in the game right now for the Militant. Alright, now let's do some tower trivia. The Militant used to be redeemable with the code JohnRBX because it was originally dedicated to the world famous YouTuber John Roblox. Interestingly enough, before the addition of the John Tower, the Paintballer was considered John's Tower. Bruh. And way back when the Militant was called John, it had an ability called Gorilla Sounds, which increased the damage of most towers around it by 30%. This lasted for 10 seconds and had a 30-second cooldown. During hardcore testing, this ability was renamed to Enraging Shout, and the ability itself was based on the infamous monkey noises that John made during his videos. This ability would play various sound effects, with some skins having their own special sounds. The sound effects for the regular Militant were voiced by John Roblox, and there were 4 lines. Oh, you think you're hard? You think you're hard, you dumb little zombies? Shred him! Shred him! Shred him! Shred! Yeah! 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 The pumpkin skin for the Militant had 2 sound effects, both of which were laughs. The Ace Pilot skin had 1 sound effect that was only used during hardcore testing. Before that, it didn't play anything. That one line was... This translates to, "You better be prepared" in English. This is a reference to John's video 02 but in Roblox, although the actual sound effects come from the anime Macross Delta. The level 1 upgrade is misspelled as precise aiming, while it should be spelled precise aiming. Originally, the Militant was supposed to get a Scar Hammer as its final weapon, although this never happened. And finally, despite the Militant wielding an HK416, the store description still mentions it using an FNFAL. And now, Now, for my much sought after opinion on this tower, it's not bad for early game. Honestly, since I found out that the current damage per second stat takes into account the reloading time, I'm not quite as annoyed with it. I still think the Militant is too similar to the Soldier, so either removing the reloading animation or adding a little more damage per shot would move its DPS further away from the Soldiers, making the two towers more distinct. And as far as I can tell from the Militant's wiki page, the devs made a pretty solid effort to keep the tower stats the same, even though they decreased its levels from 5 to 4. So even with that change, they incorporated all the damage, range, and fire rate that it had before. On the other hand, it does not look like they took into account the reloading animation in those changes. So even though I can't remember exactly what the John Tower stats were, I'm pretty sure that the reloading animation did nerf its DPS a little. But at least the DPS that we see now on the tower's wiki page is correct. And the last thing I want to say about this tower is that since it's not supposed to be used during late game, I can't really fault it for failing there. It does what it's supposed to do by killing enemies early on while you farm for stronger, more expensive towers. So is this tower hot or not? I'm gonna say not. If it was still the Monkey Man John Roblox, I'd say it was the hottest tower on the market, even if it didn't have the monkey noises ability. But for now, it's just too similar to the Soldier for me to love it. The bottom line here is that it doesn't matter if you use the Militant or not. There are plenty of other starter towers for you to use that are just as good. It does not shine in any specific area. But as always, why don't you guys tell me what you think about this? Am I completely wrong and this is a valuable tower that every pro should use? Or am I right and the Militant is a disgrace to the memory of John? Let me know down in the comments below. Alright, if you enjoyed this video, go ahead and smash that like button with your forehead, hit the subscribe button with your big toe, and turn on notifications however you can so you don't miss any of my amazing upcoming content. And I will see you guys next time. Take care, be safe, and never forget what I always say. Peace!